This is the Linguistics Podcast. Questions or comments can be directed to Twitter at LinguistChris or via email to linguistchris@gmail.com. Hello and welcome to the Linguistics Podcast. My name is Chris, and today I'm going to be introducing a pair of online tools to sort of quench your linguistic thirst. So if you're a language geek and you really want to know how you can get language data that's not only reliable but interesting, I've got two tools that you'll want to know about. First, a couple housekeeping issues. I'd like to thank all of you who have been leaving me comments on Twitter and also via email. If you didn't notice, I did change the intro so that email is more prominent. The WordPress I've sort of abandoned, so don't be discouraged if you find it out there and you don't know what it's for. It's not really for anything anymore. So now the best way to get in contact with me quickly is Twitter, and if you have a more detailed question or comment, go ahead and use my email at linguistchris@gmail.com. All right? I've also been contacted by a few language teachers, and I wanted to mention something as a result of that. Linguistic knowledge, especially the introductory linguistic stuff I went over at the beginning of the podcast in the first 5 or 6 episodes, that can make things incredibly easier. If you're learning a language or you're trying to teach a language to people as a second language or even as a foreign language, you really will be surprised by how much better people react to linguistic knowledge once they have the sort of introductory information as a framework for understanding what they're hearing. Just the concepts of morphology, syntax, phonology, these things, just knowing about them in general can really help people to learn a language. And I know that when I look to try and teach myself a new language now, the first thing I do is I sort of take a linguistic approach to things. Instead of getting the sort of teach yourself books, or an approach like Rosetta Stone or something like that, which can be helpful for the everyday person. If you're a linguist, you just dive right into grammar and you just sort of look at how the language operates. You look at its properties, so that you know what to expect, and you know how you already know how the language kind of works behind the scenes before you even started learning it, and then you just kind of fill in the blanks as you go. And it's just really quite a different approach and quite a useful approach. And I'm frankly surprised that more language courses don't take a more strict linguistic approach to things. If you take a week or two teaching people about general linguistics before you start teaching them a language, I think it can be very, very beneficial. And like I said, I'm surprised that more people don't do it. Anyway, today I'm going to try and demo 2 online tools to you that you'll find of interest if you're a language geek. Now, of course, this is an audio podcast. It's difficult to demo things, but I'll just sort of tell you what they're about, tell you where you can get them. These are both free tools, and I'll make it in such a way so that if you're at home listening to this and you're looking at these tools as I'm talking about them, you can just sort of follow along. And I'll also try and make it so that if you're not at home, let's say you're in the car, it'll still be an interesting podcast to listen to, all right? So the first of these tools is Ethnologue. Now, Ethnologue is the sort of classical linguistic information source. They've been around forever. It used to be as a print source. Now they're available as a free online source, which is nice. So they're available at ethnologue.com. That's ethnologue.com. It's from the Summer Institute of Linguistics. Like I said, they've been around forever, and what they do is they catalog languages in a very anthropological way. So if you go to that website, the first thing you'll see is that pops up right at the top, browse the web version or preview the print version. The print version, like I said, it's available in a new edition every year for cost, of course. The web version is free to browse, so go ahead and click Browse the Web Version, and you're immediately presented with a menu. On the left side, different ways to browse the Ethnologue, and on the right side, an actual table of contents like you'd get from the print version. All right. Now, the nice thing about Ethnologue is that its focus is to just catalog as many languages as possible. It lists at the top. It says cataloging all the world's 6,909 known living languages. I don't know if Ethnologue actually has 6,909 entries. It might. Certainly, some entries are shorter than others. But that's certainly a good it's certainly a good attempt at cataloging all the languages it possibly can. So there's a couple ways to browse this. One is to search Ethnologue, and so that's what I'm going to introduce here. That's the last entry on the left side before you hit the miscellaneous section. So you hit search Ethnologue, and it's a Google custom search. And all you do is you type the name of a language or a language family. So I'm going to type in Finnish, just because it's a language that most people know about but don't know much about. And the first hit is Ethnologue report for language code FIN. Ethnologue, the way it catalogs languages and families is it gives them each a 3-letter code. So FIN is for Finnish, and it says here language of Finland, and it just gives you basic facts about, in this case, Finnish. So the population of Finnish speakers in Finland as of 1993, and I'll mention why that's so old in a second, is 4.7 million Finnish speakers in Finland. 30,000 of those are speakers of Tornedalen Finnish. I hope I pronounced that right. And the population total of all Finnish speakers in all countries is about 5 million and change. Now, that's data from 1993. Obviously, that's going on 20 years old. Why is that so old? Well, as Ethnologue as a source grows in terms of how many languages it has cataloged, that also means because they have a finite number of people working at Summer Institute of Linguistics, that means that they can't update every entry as often as might be optimal. And that is one of the drawbacks to a source like Ethnologue compared to another source that I'm going to show you in a second. But at the very least, it's great for linguistic information. Just sort of in one time and place, we know that there were this many speakers of Finnish. It shows you regions where Finnish is also spoken. This would be Canada, Estonia, Norway, Russian Federation, Sweden, and the U.S. It shows you alternate names. Shows you lists of dialects. What's the difference between a dialect and a language? We'll go over that in a future episode. It shows you the classification of Finnish. So it's in the Finnic genus, in the Uralic family. Language usage, it is an official language in some country, Finland obviously in this case. It shows you the script that it uses. It uses Latin script. And then you'll see under words it says also spoken in, and it shows you language facts about Finnish spoken in countries besides Finland. So, for example, in the Russian Federation, there are some 34,000 speakers of Finnish out of an ethnic population of 77,000 Finns. Okay, so it's very interesting anthropological information organized linguistically. Okay, that's what Ethnologue is. Let me go back one step here. So instead of using the search, you can also browse a country index with maps. So you hit country index with maps and you get a world map. You click on any continent. So let me click on, let's say, Africa. Africa, by the way, is very, very linguistically rich. And if I click Africa, I get a list of countries in Africa. So let me pick, I don't know, let's pick Zimbabwe. And I get a list of languages in Zimbabwe. And I'm sorry if I murder some of these pronunciations, but we have Dombe. English, of course, is a language of Zimbabwe. Fanagalo, Kalanga, Kunda, Lotsi, Manyika, Nambia, Ndao, and so on and so forth. And each of those listings has individual information about that language. So Dombe, for example, as of 2006, has a little over, almost 5,500 speakers in the Hwange district in Lukosi area. It's related to Tonga with Nambia influences, and it's got a classification of Niger-Congo language, Atlantic Congo, Volta Congo, so on and so forth. I mean, just crazy amounts of information here, and I can even hit more information just about Dombe, and I get its actual page on the Ethnologue with its classification and other information about it. So, Ethnologue, great source for the linguistic geek, all right? There is one other source that I think is even better than Ethnologue. Ethnologue, of course, very anthropological. There's a slightly less anthropological source that's a little bit more into the theoretic linguistic side, and I think it's more interesting. As a caveat, it has fewer languages included. Okay, this next source I think has upwards of 500 languages, but not over 1,000, I don't believe. But it's a great source. It's called the World Atlas of Language Structures, And this is more of a typological source, and that's why this episode, by the way, has come after the last one. The last one being on linguistic typology, which is, of course, the study of sets of features across languages generally. The World Atlas of Language Structures is a typological source. I've worked directly with two linguists who have worked on this project, and both of them were very, very strong linguistic typologists. There was no doubt about it. So this is a great source, again, available in print form. The print form's very, very expensive. A copy of Ethnologue is $100. I think a copy of World Atlas of Language Structures is even more than $100. But the online source, again, is free. So you're presented, when you go to the site, this is wals.info, it's WALS.info. You see a green bar, which says home, features, chapters, languages, references, authors, etc. And these are different ways that you can browse the Atlas of Language Structures. And probably the most useful way is to simply click Features. Now, Features takes you to a list of different linguistic features, each identified by an arbitrary numerical identifier and an area which they fall under. So an area is things like phonology, morphology, things like that, the sort of subfields that we went over earlier in the podcast, and some other sort of more specialized areas like nominal categories, that's noun categories, nominal syntax, that's syntax concerning nouns, verbal categories, so on and so forth. Word order is another one. Okay, so the list here goes on and on, really. We have consonant inventories, vowel quality inventories, consonant vowel ratios, voicing and plosives and fricatives, voicing and gaps and plosive systems. Long, long list of things here, right? But if you click any one of them, let me click consonant inventories, then you immediately see why this is such a useful tool. If I click consonant inventories, I see that it's split into 5 different values. One is small, then moderately small, average, moderately large, and large, with a total list of index languages of 563. And I see that 90 languages have a consonant inventory, which is known as small. Okay, and I can click the 90 languages, and I get the list of those 90 languages which are known to have small consonant inventories. I see here on this list Cherokee, Comanche, let's see, Fasu, Hawaiian, Maori. It's a long list of languages that are all listed under this. And where this comes in really handy is you get a color for each of these different values. So small, for example, is blue. And I can push show map at the top of the page. And then everywhere on the map that has a blue dot represents a language that has a small consonant inventory. A light blue dot is moderately small, a white dot is average, and so on. It's a great visual way to explore language structures and how they're split up across the world. And I can see from this map that there doesn't seem to be an appreciable pattern for languages with small consonant inventories, except that they tend to bunch together. And that's also interesting if you really think about it. So you never really see a blue dot in isolation. You always see a bunch of blue dots together, and that's interesting, right? Because each blue dot is its own language. And likewise with any other color, they tend to be bunched. And that's very interesting. And that gets even more interesting if you look at something that's not just consonant inventory. So let's go to, let's see, so number of cases. Cases is something I think I may have touched on in the syntax episode, although maybe not. Cases are things like nominative case, accusative case. In English, when we say he loves her, the reason it's not he loves she is because she is the nominative pronoun and her is the accusative pronoun in English. That's the only place where cases really show up in English syntax. They're used to denote what role a certain constituent plays in a sentence, and it's often referred to as morphosyntax because some of it is morphological and some of it's syntactic. But if I look here at a number of cases, I see that some languages have 10 or more cases. I mean, that's a crazy amount of cases. English, the only differentiation English really makes is between two possible cases, really. You have languages like German, which have a much more involved case marking system within the Indo-European family. Nominative, accusative, dative, genitive, I think that's all German has is 4 cases. So let's go with 4 cases, right? So I see that 9 languages have 4 cases. Let's see if I was right. Yes, German indeed is on the list for 4 cases, as well as Icelandic, Albanian, so on and so forth. Now I should mention that there's only 261 languages which are categorized by case in this listing, but still, better than nothing, and it's still an interesting source. And again, I'll hit show map. And let's see what the distribution looks like here. And yeah, again, it looks like, well, first of all, it's clear that the majority of languages have no morphological case marking. At least it looks like a majority. It might be about half and half between having some case marking and not any case marking. But if languages do mark for case, again, they're sort of bunched up. So I see a couple of examples here of languages with 8 or 9 cases, looks like in Northern Australia, bunched together, also in the western part of South America here. This sort of bunching is what you'd expect, and maybe in the future we'll talk about language interaction and why you don't really see isolated languages often. So that is the World Atlas of Language Structures. Great source. You can spend hours on it if you're geeky like me with this kind of stuff. Just going through just not only the list of features, which in itself is very interesting, how you can classify different features cross-linguistically, but another interesting point of all this is that you've got this tremendous list of features, and yet in almost every single case, you've got tremendous differentiation between the same feature set, or among the same feature sets. Again, that's an argument against the sort of universal grammar argument of Noam Chomsky that we went over briefly in the last episode. So that's something to keep in mind as you look at this stuff, is just the crazy amount of difference among languages. And yet, again, linguistic knowledge like this, knowing what a linguistic feature is, knowing about syntax and morphology, you can still describe all of the possible languages. You just know that there's a good amount of difference between them. Okay? All right, so that's the 2 tools that I wanted to tell you guys about today. It's a way to quench your linguistic thirst. So again, those tools were the World Atlas of Language Structures online, that's at wals.info, and the other one is Ethnologue at ethnologue.com. Both of them are free for online. Their online versions are free, or they do have print versions available at cost. All right. So I'd like to thank you guys for listening. Once again, I've changed the way that I'm having people contact me. My original plan with comments on a WordPress blog failed on my part because I didn't update it. So now I'm available via Twitter is still the quickest way, 140 characters at a time, at LinguistChris. And you can also contact me by sending an email to linguistchris@gmail.com. Thanks again.